Oh, who's a good head crab? Who's a good head crab? Oh, sorry. um, hello. Welcome to the Black Mesa Natural History Department.
Your bros will make an excellent team. Hello, everyone, to part 2 of the CM Kozeman Natural History of Half-Life Special. If you're here, I'm assuming you must have watched part 1 and seen me talk about what an amazing game Half-Life was. You've probably seen me beg for donations on patreon.com, and yes, they really matter because every penny counts in this day and age, so please consider supporting this channel. And you probably know what an important and interesting and unique game Half-Life was at the time of its publication. Now, this series is a two-part video documentary studying all the enemies, the creatures, and their probable evolutionary associations and their relations in natural history and the entertainment industry in general. So it's a big documentary. So if you're accidentally find yourself here, go and watch part 1. It probably won't make sense. I'm splitting these into two because, well, I'm making this from a dinky computer with a dinky microphone, and we've seen all these creatures and studied their similarities in real life situations, evolutionary scenarios. I saw and ventured into many tangents, and we also slowly but patiently built up a family tree of all the creatures that exist in the Half-Life and the Half-Life Opposing Force games. Now, this guide does not focus on Half-Life 2 or Half-Life Alyx or any of the later games, principally because I haven't played them, but also the original game was kind of more unique and meaningful in that context. So without much ado, let's go. The last we left off, we studied all these creatures. Let me just do a little speed run. We studied head crabs, voltigons, alien grunts, the gargantua creature, and the bull squid, ichthyosaur, the sound dogs or whatever these are called, the wasp gun, and the tentacles, the worst and least imaginatively named creature in the series. We studied the manta rays, the barnacles, and the leeches. And now we are moving on with our study. We divided them into groups in according to cladistic rules. So you really need to watch part 1. I'm just not gonna waste any more time, and let's go. Last time we studied the snarks, and in my analysis it had come out as a relative of the giant gargantua because of their eye structure and because, well, both creatures seem to have 6 legs and an insectoid back shell. Okay, let's move on, and we now encounter controllers, and I think this is a threshold in which the player crosses over to Zen, the alien world. One of the twists of the game is that you all fight the aliens as they invade the world from another dimension, but you also cross back to their dimension as well. So these are floating boss-like creatures. They look like humanoids with gas-filled heads, with another third leg or third arm in their chest. So kind of relatives of the vortigons, maybe. And that's once more. It's another unique way that Half-Life was basically good because, well, in few other computer games did we have enemies which clearly had an evolutionary relation to one another, and Half-Life was unique in that respect. So these guys float about, they shoot balls of fire, and they're basically very notorious to kill. They're called controllers. They seem to be slave drivers for the vortigons and other enslaved races, and it kind of implies that there's a hierarchy in this race. So in real life, unfortunately, their structure resembles this awful medical condition called a hydrocephalus, in which the baby is born with a liquid-filled head, and it kind of pressures the skull to grow and grow. And sometimes, unfortunately, their heads also rupture, and they kind of look like these controllers with their open heads. But of course, this is an unfortunate situation. They also kind of resemble these big-headed alien creatures people see in these mid-century astounding stories, amazing stories. Like, at least in the cover art, you got a lot of big balloon-headed aliens doing strange things. This might even be a man from the future, I don't know. It's forced to live in this medical or like technologically developed shell, and it's using differently colored flashlights to terrorize who looks like an advertising executive. Stories by H.G. Wells, Garrett Smith, and Hayat Verrill. What a memento from a bygone great era. So there's not much more to associate these controllers with. They're just run-of-the-mill humanoid floating aliens. And they're obviously with the tree limbs in our cladistic tree. Now, this is also a feature of the previous video. We're classifying every creature in this big cladistic tree. So they kind of seem aligned to the pentapodiform group with their chest arms and all that. Blip. But as a maybe subgroup, which I named Aerocephala, the air-headed ones. But they certainly belong together. So we've also added the controllers to the list. Let's go on and let's look at some of the Zen trees now. The player at one point crosses to this threshold of another planet called Zen, and there we encounter a lot of strange plants and plant-like growths. Some of these are enemies, some of these are just landscape elements, but they're just cool. That's another thing, like immersion. Like when you played this game and got to this place, even though the graphics were very low polygon, you really felt like you arrived at a different place because the whole world was so internally consistent and like well thought out that you really like got caught up with the world building game. And you had these trees which kind of like resembled claws, and they struck you if you came too close to them, so they were a hazard. You got these light things which kind of blinked off if you came close to them, but there was nothing wrong about them. You also had this thing called the purple crystal which zapped you if you got close. And then you also had these trees that looked like head crabs, but they were actually plants, so they were like static plant-like things. These were called violet crystals. These were called Zen spores. Those things were called claw trees, and this thing was called a light stalk, maybe. Here's the whole bunch. A happy, happy family. All right, so let's try to look at their real-life parallels. Obviously, there are just too many strange plants to just touch upon in this brief 2-part, 3-hour-long mega documentary. But we can clearly see that the claw trees are like almost 101 direct copies, dare I say, of these butcher trees from Darwin 4, which were touched upon by the great and immortal science fiction artist Wayne Douglas Barlow in his equally immortal book Expedition. If you don't know what these are, you should probably go take a look at Darwin 4 or Wayne Barlow. It's almost certain that the designers of this game knew about Darwin 4 and the Expedition book, which came out in 1986, if I'm not mistaken. So these are similar trees. They like impale their prey on these moving mantis-like stalks. There's even a kind of floating associate organism that kind of lives around these trees, and it attracts these other animals to the tree, which the tree then stabs and drains. So it's a kind of symbiosis thing, and it's even implied in the book that this little thing might be the male of the giant tree species. So it's a really good case of world building, and let's just say that the designers of Half-Life stole from the best. Also, there are cases of carnivorous trees in worldwide cryptozoology or cryptobotany, let's say. But before getting to that, there's even an argument to be made for the humble bramble thorn that produces these berry-like things. You can readily find them in Europe or the UK or Asia. There's an argument to be made for them being carnivorous trees. Basically, a lot of times sheep get caught in them, and if they're not rescued, they die. And when they die, their juices seep into the surrounding soil, which provides nourishment and fertilizer for the plant. So somebody made an argument, sheep get caught in bramble, sheep will die without human intervention. The rotting corpse of the sheep will nourish the plant for many days, and apparently bramble thorns ingle inwards. Like, if you ever taken walks in bramble covered fields, you really do feel that these plants, they tore my pants up so many times. These plants really look like they were quote unquote designed to restrain moving things. So maybe not as dramatic as the clow tree, but yes, a case could be made for bramble being a predatory plant. What do you think? If you agree, let me know in the comments and we can discuss. Of course, the literature of cryptobotany is crowded with man-eating wines and plants. Here is one, the Nicaraguan vampire wine, as told in the 1891 issue of the Review of Reviews. And I'm not going to dwell too deep into this, but apparently someone named Mr. Dunstan found a tree with branches that were covered with a black viscous gum, and drawing his knife he attacked to rescue the animal, but only with the greatest difficulty did he succeed in severing the muscular fibers. And then apparently this thing was a muscular octopus-like animal-eating tree. Of course, it was just a tall tale, unfortunately, but in this article it says if you throw a lump of raw meat in it, in the space of 5 minutes, the blood will be thoroughly drunk off the mane and the mass thrown aside. Its voracity is almost beyond belief. Ladies and gentlemen, the Nicaraguan vampire wine. I'm sure some people would have a fetish to be entangled in one. Anyways, there are other and more different vampiric or predatory trees. There's something called the Yateveo, which is reported from South America and Africa, and supposedly this is also a carnivorous plant. And then from Madagascar, there are reports of a man-eating tree. Now, these narratives all go hand in hand with the kind of colonial and alienating approach. Africa, South America, Mosquito Coast, Nicaragua, these are all other places where wild plants suck meat of ignorant natives, according to these people's beliefs. I'm not saying every report of a strange cryptid from, let's say, the developing world is complicit in this sort of imperial attitude, but they somehow, in most cases, were fellow travelers. So that is something to note for. In fact, there's even a book called Madagascar, the Land of the Man-Eating Tree, by Chase Salmon Osborne, published in 1925. You can find and download this book. It's an interesting travel book. But in the book's title is about the man-eating tree, but actually in the book the author says, I do not know whether this tigerish tree really exists or whether the blood-curdling stories are pure myth. It is enough for my purpose if its story focuses your interest upon one of the least known spots of the world. So, like, even as they were publishing them, people were kind of knowing that these stories were sauce on the siding, to say, to make these distant countries and colonial lands more delectable to the mainland reader. Make of this what you will. And then in our cladistic tree, let's place these bad boys. Remember the light-bearing stalks and the zapping violet crystals. I placed them in a new group called Luxovermes, the light worms, because they don't look like plants, but they look kind of like strange worm-like sessile things. And the clow trees I classified with the Xenovermoidea group that contains the barnacles and the the leech. Maybe this group is also fake and like an artificial group. Maybe these animals are not truly related, but at least the barnacle and the clow tree may belong together because they're all sit and wait predators. Who knows? The clow tree also kind of look like the tentacle, which is actually not a tentacle but a worm-like thing, but I think it's a case of parallel evolution. And then finally, the spore trees I classified under the cephaloparasita group, containing the head crabs. They really look like once moving relatives of these things that have taken root and borne fruit, that's to say. And then you got these little things called the zomboids. They're not proper enemies. They're like these floating bird-like things you see on this alien world level. And they form these beautiful flocks, and they're just like an immersive detail in the landscape. They look like this as they float about. The weird shapes on the horizon, they look like these galactic artifacts, but they're actually magnified images of pollen. So that's another little detail from the Half-Life game for you. So these boids float about, and they're just alien and beautiful and bat-like. In real life, they kind of look like, once again, the many forms of strange leathery winged flying aliens from Darwin 4 in Wayne Barlow's Expedition. There are even like these jet darters, which kind of have a similar low polygon look, but they are actually this fleshy jet engine glow-in-the-dark creatures. This book is really fantastic. You must get this book and you must read it. But actually, through their names, you can see the boids are an allusion to this programming computer science thing, where basically researchers use a few simple rules to simulate complex flocking behaviors. So they say you have to keep a certain distance from each other. That's the separation rule. You have to all face the same way. That's the alignment rule. And you have to like stick together, so not get too far, kind of give each other breathing space. And by using these few rules, they really make realistic looking simulations of flocks. These flocks can also avoid obstacles. They really work and move like real life animals. And that's like a direct hat tip to the boids. And in fact, I think the boids in Half-Life probably had a similar kind of programming and artificial intelligence. So in our cladistic tree, the boids are aligned with the aerozoa group next to the manta ray floating vehicles that you observe on some of the earlier levels. And you can see our family tree is really beginning to team up, and it's really looking like a division of the natural world. I used my intuition to classify them because, well, this is a computer game. But what do you think? Like, do you think something should be in another group, or like, share your opinions in the comments below. And then in Zen, we also have Gonarch. Who can forget this thing? Oh, it's a kind of running, enormous testicle creature that breeds these little head crab babies. This is basically the mother of all head crabs, which you see earlier in the game. It runs about, and it has got a kind of mortar-like attack, which kind of is difficult to defeat. Unfortunately, you are forced to kill this creature before you can complete this level, and I did that grudgingly. And this is Gonarch, so happy mama, what can I say? But a beautiful and very original creature. In terms of gameplay, it's also like the deepest level of immersion to like go back to one of the first enemies that appear in the game and then basically confront the player with their mother. So it's like great design, like in terms of context as well as visual appearances. In terms of real life, I mean, the elephant in the room is this ball sack dangling under the Gonarch creature, and everybody obviously likened this to a testicle. And like the elephant in the room, there is a disease called elephantosis. If it infects the scrotum, you get this thing called the scrotal elephantesis, which gives people a really painful and large scrotum, and it's just sad and scary looking. What can I say? The temptation is really big to make fun of these things, but these happen to real people, so I'll just skip. Gonarch also looks like a giant crab, which has allusions to, I think, these giant Japanese crabs, the largest crabs inhabiting our planet today. Macrocheira campheri, they're really gigantic, quite big. If you look at this, now these things around its feet, they're like Alaskan Bigfoot crabs. Like, these crabs already are gigantic, like they would fill a diner plate. And this thing is at a whole other level. What a fantastic creature. Oh, I've been speaking non-stop for 2 hours. Let me take a sip of the Kozeman juice while you look at Gonarch's position in the Black Mesa classification tree. Once again, it falls in the same group with the... Well, it breeds head crabs, so we know it's actually the fully grown form of the head crab. So Gonarch is part of the Cephaloparasita group alongside the spore trees, which maybe these also are head crabs that did not find the host, so they turn into these weird sterile tree forms. Who knows? Actually, the ground in Zen itself might be flesh, and maybe these are just head crabs parasitizing the fleshy landscape like like tiny mites on a giant body. Who knows? It's fun to play these games. And then at the end of the game, we come to Nihilant. Who can forget this thing speaking backwards? It speaks to you and it kind of hints at a conspiracy below the conspiracy of the events in the game. And back in the day, there were no shortage of fan theories about Nihilant. It's this floating baby-like creature with what appears to be 5 eyes, 3 rudimentary eyes, a third arm, and a kind of like stitched up body form. Obviously, this is a bit like, well, when you have an autopsy and you sew the body up, you use this kind of staples. It's really gnarly. And it shoots sparks, and like you shoot at it and it dies. You have to shoot its fragile place, which is the interior of its exposed skull. And this is Nihilant. Like the alien controllers, which it looks similar to, I don't think this is a creative design, to be honest. In real life, it may have some parallels in like some of the weird deformed bodies you see in certain museums around the world. The human body is a wonderful machine, and it's even like more wonderful in the ways it can go wrong during development. And if you go to museums like the Mutter Museum in Pennsylvania, what was the name of the city? Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Wait, is Philadelphia in Pennsylvania? I don't know, it was in Philadelphia. In my honeymoon, we drove up there and we couldn't get to this museum. It's still one of my, it's still in my bucket list. I don't know. So it kind of was inspired by something like this, but the designers made it similar to these like basically Vortigons and stuff. But in the deeper lore of Half-Life, this guy, Nihilant, is actually a slave driver enslaving the Vortigon race and pressing them off to war, basically. But in our scientifically rigorous diagram, I aligned it with the controllers in the Aerocephala group. There's a clear similarity. I mean, there's a clear pattern to observe there. So, and beyond that, it's not a very interesting creature. I think it's one of the most boring designs in the game, to be honest. By the way, my favorite design in the game is either the bull squid or the cat, basically. And then we moved to Opposing Force, which was a kind of follow-up. It wasn't a sequel, but it was a kind of game set in the same setting and the universe. Obviously, they tried to milk the franchise for like more unit sales back in the day. So in Half-Life, one of the main themes is like you also combat a lot of human enemies. And these are like soldiers sent into the site to wipe out any witnesses, basically. So you also play the game from their perspective. Your mission is to eliminate Gordon Freeman. To add some variety, the designers created an entirely new band of enemies for this game. In fact, an entirely new race called Race X. And correct me if I'm wrong, but apparently these also entered the facility from a breach to a different dimension. So somehow they're not from the same dimension as all these guys. So they have a unique ecology of their own. But some of them also look similar. So we're also going to go through all the Race X enemies and classify them. Let's go. We got the Shock Troopers and their spore launchers. These are these like 4-armed, big-eyed, amok-running, vicious creatures. And this is what they look like in-game. these other buddies we're gonna get to later, they have these organic weapons, and actually one of their weapons called the shock launcher apparently is the tadpoles level. So it's like a bunch of like yummy mummies or Sunday daddies using their babies as weapons to basically clear out a room. And if you've ever been to like a shopping mall or a busy place of the city in a weekend, you can see that like this really entitled, stupid mid-30s new parent characters in most countries of the world, they literally use their freaking babies like weapons, pushing their prams to clear a path. And come on, I think it's just one of the most annoying things in public life. But anyways, back to Half-Life and Opposing Force. So these are what we get. In real life parallels, there are many creatures with 4 arms and alien invaders with singular eyes. So I'm not going to dive too deep into that aspect. But in terms of design, they kind of resemble this one creature from, once again, Wayne Barlow's amazing book. This time not Expedition, but Barlow's Guide to Extraterrestrials, in which Wayne Barlow read many classics of sci-fi literature and illustrated the aliens. And one of them is this alien called a Trint, which is a telepathic slaver species native to the Known Space series from Larry Niven. Larry Niven is also a very creative sci-fi writer. Too bad he became a raging libertarian and almost like a Reaganist right-winger towards the end of his career. But the resemblance is difficult to ignore, and I'm certain that the designers of the Half-Life series saw the Wayne Barlow books, Expedition and Guide to Extraterrestrial. The single eye also is like really prominent. They obviously did this in order to like highlight the design as a new creature, so it's a different game almost, even though it's not. So basically, it kind of looks like these shark embryos that people sometimes found, and they're afflicted with cyclopia. These things never live, but they look weirdly hilarious. So they have got the same sense of like cartoony, big-eyed look. And I'm sure like if the Race X shock troopers were ever real, they would have this kind of Gumby flesh texture. I don't know. So in our cladistic tree now, we have to make room for these creatures. They have 6 legs, so I tentatively placed them with the Gargantua and the Snark, but they kind of look different too. So I'm just keeping them in with them as a placeholder measure. But we'll see how the situation evolves. Then we have the shock roaches, which are just these other weapons that these soldiers wield. They look like these spiders or claws, and they just shoot these like bug kind of things, and they never run out of ammo, basically. In real life, they resemble these giant eurypterids. If you want to know more about these things, they're basically these like distant relatives of scorpions and spiders that lived in the earliest world oceans. Some of them grew extremely large, and in fact, if you go to my channel videos and watch the CM Kozam and Arachnid specials, I talk for hours and hours about every group of Erupterid known to science. So there. Also, if you watch the first part of this video, the Half-Life series, you will see many more living weapons from the history of science fiction and beyond. So there. In the cladistic tree, I put the shock roach next to the hive gun. In the same group, Hoplozoa, the probably genetically modified living weapons. So that's their group. And I'm pretty confident in that assignment. Then we have pit drones. These are these really funny guys. They're like these birdy dinosaur things without heads, but their heads also have these rocket launcher-like things. They're one of the toughest and most creatively designed enemies in the game. They look like nothing I can put my finger on, except they're cool. In real life, their heads look like these rocket pods you found in helicopters and ground attack aircraft. And these are just like, I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of one, but in terms of aesthetics, they're really beautiful and quite gnarly too. In certain contemporary conflicts, such as Libya and Syria, people stole these from military bases and placed them on cars to kind of create this similar like heavy weapons body that in the game these shock troopers use. Remember, like they're always like sometimes seen in association with these guys, using them to cover. So there's an interesting approach, like the vehicular warfare covering ground troopers. They are covering the other ground troopers. And yes, this led to some certain like really Mad Max like scenes in contemporary conflicts, mounted on Toyota pickups and used just for indiscriminate ground attack. Some people even pimped them up and like turned them into like almost these computer game like rides. These conflicts are deeply unfair, cruel, and lamentable. But maybe there's a game mode waiting to be made with like weapon systems like this. I don't know. And then these guys also look a bit like these dagger wrist creatures from Expedition, and once more Wayne Barlow's immortal book about life on an alien planet. Their front arms kind of look similar, and their mouths look like the mouth parts of sun spiders. Once again, if you look at my channel videos and watch the Arachnid special, you can actually listen to a very well illustrated lecture by yours truly about these creatures, and there are many, many groups of sun spiders. So in our cladistic tree, these guys don't fit anywhere. I put them in a group of their own called Acanthocephala, may be aligned to tripodiforms or these, but I don't know. Acanthocephala means spikeheads, so they're in a group of themselves. And then we have the pit worm, which is a level boss. It's basically this big-eyed caterpillar-like thing the player must kill, and it's a kind of dangerous thing. It shoots a laser out of its single eye, and that's what it looks like. Clearly, it's related to these shock troopers, Race X shock troopers, and it kind of borrows some of its appearance from the trash compactor creature in the Star Wars universe. It is known as a Dianoga, and it's one of the most creative and interesting designs in the original movie, all the way in 1977. Can you believe it? Oh. This is what the Dianoga creature looks like with its entire body, but in the film you only get to see an eye and then some tentacles. The way the pitworm shoots lasers out of its eye also reminds me of this one very creative alien from David Brin's Uplift universe. So please comment if you read this book, because this series is amazing. Basically, in the setting of many, many books, intelligent species cannot evolve, but in fact they must be domesticated by other aliens. And one of the big questions is that humans, we don't know who domesticated humans, so that's a mystery. But one of the characters there is called Kulla, and he has these gigantic eyes. His ancestors had a single eye, but the creatures that domesticated and uplifted them split them off into two eyes. And with these stereo eyes, Kulla can also project natural lasers, project holograms, which deceive a lot of people in the story. So he's like a trickster, evil character. And most importantly, they can shoot a laser beam. And because this is like quote-unquote hard sci-fi, you don't see any beams. But basically, if this thing looks at you, your eyes can just go blind, because he just used an infrared laser to blind you. And he can just kill you by looking at you. And his name is Kulla, but his full name is Kulla Tapring Pil Ab Kisa Absoro Abhub Abpuber. So the way these names go is like Kulla of the Pring race, domesticated by the Pil race. Ab means son of. Domesticated by the Kisa race, domesticated by the Xoro race, domesticated by the Hub race, domesticated by the Puber race. And this way, this Uplift universe has entire chains of godlike aliens uplifting and domesticating each other. And I really recommend, if you like, spring is coming up, maybe summer is coming up, go buy all the books of the Uplift series by David Brin and read them. They're like very fun to read, and they're very thought-provoking too. The Uplift universe is one of the most underappreciated sci-fi sagas on the planet. And anyways, in our cladistic tree, okay, now remember, We used to think that these soldiers were part of the hexapodiforms group, but I think the six legs thing was just a parallel evolution thing. So I put them in a different group now, united by this gigantic eye and these multiple limbs. Obviously, the pitworm has even more limbs, so like a caterpillar. In these other guys, the limbs develop into two rear legs, but in this guy, they just stay in a caterpillar-like state. And I call them vermopsiforms, the worm eye forms. So that's my uniting clade. And then in the legions of race X, we have voltigores, which are these like shambling, stumbling, electricity shooting guys. They also nest and have babies. Unfortunately, they look like badly designed. I mean, there's something about their design that is just off. They don't have the quality of cohesion you would see on other creatures. So maybe they took a second tier design and finalized it. It looks like a bit shoddily made. If you look at their real life parallels, they're almost certainly inspired by the scrubs and the paramites from the Oddworld series. These are also similarly eyeless. They have like human-like limbs that terminate in long claw-like hooves, and they kind of like they gallop all over the place. So I'm certain that some of the Half-Life crew played Oddworld. By the way, I know that some designers for Half-Life are very active online. So if you watch this film and want to leave a comment, I would be so honored. And I would love to hear the deepest lore from you as well. So there, from a long-time fan, a hat tip to you guys. If I critique these, don't take it the wrong way. It's only out of respect that I am devoting all this time to these things. So let's see where these fit. So these, these voltigores, and they're difficult to place. Maybe they're related to these spiky pit drones, but they have 6 or more legs. So I thought maybe they were like a blind form of the vermopsiform group, or maybe they might be a uniting group that is somehow related to the acanthocephalans and the vermopsiforms alike. So I classified them as a subgroup, which I named Ungulodactyla, which means hoof fingers. So there. Oh, anyways. Wow, my head is truly frayed. Okay, then when you get to the end of opposing forms, you have something called the gene worm, which is a final level boss. Apparently it's trying to cross from a portal, and you really need to defeat this bad guy, and like you have to defeat it, or in the game it is hinted that this animal has the capacity to terraform entire planets. So like you have to kick this guy back in, or it will destroy the world basically. And its design really looks like the tentacles from the original Half-Life, except the body is kind of shorter, and some of the mouth parts have been extended into limb-like things. In real life, it reminded me of Audrey 2 from this great 1986 musical called The Little Shop of Horrors. And it's called Audrey 2 because Audrey 1 is this guy's girlfriend, and he names it in a cute way after her. But then this thing is a symbol of basically the never-ending lust for more that people have. So it grows and grows. It devours everything that this guy holds dear. And even though it's a sing-along happy musical, the film ends in a really dark tone. These plants multiply and get out of control and take over the planet, basically. And in fact, in the last part of the movie, it is hinted that these were actually aliens. So they just landed on Earth and they colonized Earth. So that's, I think, like direct analogy between The Little Shop of Horrors and this gene worm. Half-Life has a strange sort of like oblique way of naming things. Gene worm. I mean, you would expect this to be like a parasite creature, but no, it's actually an end of the world, destroyer of everything kind of terraform creature. Strangely enough, when we look at our cladistic tree, the gene worm almost is a one-on-one match with the tentacle creatures in the Enigmodira group. It does not belong with the race X creatures at all, neither Vermopsiforms nor Acanthocephalans. So there, that's my thing. So somehow, maybe this thing is an escapee from Zen, or maybe the faunas of both worlds of Planet X and Zen share a common ancestry. And it's not like these are like proper planets either. They are like these like floating realms. So maybe there are like these floating islands of ecosystems that are like continent-sized floating things, but are not proper planets. Who knows? But anyways, then before going, we have Chumtoad. This was almost cut from the final game, but made it back in the final game of Opposing Force. It also appears in that other spin-off game called Half-Life Blue Shift. Basically, it's this one-eyed toad guy. They also designed this with 6 eyes, but it appears with 1 eye in the games. And it's just, you can pick it up and throw at people. It's just this really harmless, cute Easter egg type of creature. They sometimes appear in secret rooms. They're just really cute. And it's one of those things in the game which I wish exists. In real life, there are many toad-like creatures, but I'll just harp on the name. They call this Chumtoad. One of the game files is actually called Chubtoad, which is funny because that's the nickname my wife has for me. She calls me Chub. Okay, I'm a Chubtoad. But in real life, chum is actually a disgusting mix of festering blanded fish and blood. And usually fishermen or fisherwomen, fishing people, prepare this blanded mix of like stinking fish parts, basically to attract game fish or sharks from both. Yes, this is what chum looks like. And I think in the game you also can use Chumtoad as a bait for other creatures. If you have no heart, how could you hurt this thing? Look at it. So nice. Chunky. And in the cladistic tree, Chumtoad is part of the Vermopsiform group, as evidenced by its gigantic eye. It's a Vermopsiform that has even less legs. We already know from the pitworm that these legs can decrease in number as the animal matures. So it's got 4 legs and a big eye, and it's just that. So there, everyone, that's our family tree for the creatures in the Half-Life universe, as gleaned from Half-Life and Half-Life Opposing Force, the 2 OG games. Now, I'm not going to do the other games, but if you want to take a screenshot, I'm giving you 10 seconds now. Do it. And while you're at it, please write a comment. Say this. All glory to the Chumtoad, okay? All glory to the Chumtoad. So it helps me with the algorithm, and I know that you watched both parts until this very end. But it's not over yet. There are, in the game files, also secret and deleted creatures. Now, we're not going to put them in our family tree, but we're just going to skim through them. One of them even is this joke-like thing, which is a penguin with a grenade strapped onto its back. And it was meant to be a weapon in the multiplayer version of Opposing Force. But let's go. You got things like Mr. Friendly, which I think is the most memorable deleted Half-Life creature. Mr. Friendly is basically this skull crab-like abomination with long limbs and spiky nipples and this like weird face. Just flails all over the place, and in one memorable instance, apparently it even tries to make love to the player in the wrong way. That's why it gets the name Mr. Friendly. It appears to be a kind of like weird R-word joke placed into the game. And the lore behind this thing is very strange. So a designer working on Half-Life had a 12-year-old brother, just like one of those sweaty, mustache-bearing little kids that basically were the target demographic of this game. So this guy liked drawing. So guy said to the kid, hey, draw me some monsters and maybe I can show it to my boss. And then he showed them to basically Gabe Newell, who was the managing director. And some of the things that this 12-year-old kid drew were very sexually oriented, apparently. One of these guys, Mr. Friendly, had an obvious penis. And then apparently the kid designed this as a R-word creature. Yeah, there's no getting around this. Now, actually, the big boss really liked this because I think he was like a really smart guy. He knew his audience would be going through the throes of adolescence. And that's one of the dimensions of computer games that many people forget. That many computer games are marketed to adolescent or pubescent boys, and there's only one thing in the minds of these boys. So it was almost included in the game as a way to create this kind of uncanny valley to maybe get the players to realize that the joke's on them, but I guess that didn't go out that way. But one of my favorite takeaways from this deep lore section is that the sexual themes of these enemies were intended to elicit a response from the homophobia of these 14-year-old boys. And of course, as we know, some of these 14-year-old boys never grew up and call themselves stupid names like Sargon of Akkad, and they thought they had a chance making Trump tweet Gamergate 2.0. And man, like, what a fucking forgettable footnote that guy is. Anyway, not Trump. Anyways, similar weird sexual themes have been explored in some other games, though. And the most memorable of them is this one particular encounter with this demon called Pyramid Head in the Silent Hill games. Basically, Silent Hill is a horror game. And in one part of this game, you go through a long corridor. There's like 20 doors in that corridor. You try to unlock them all, and none of them get unlocked. Finally, you unlock one of them, and you see this pyramid-headed creature apparently having like some very rough kink action with these two creatures that look like two very sexy ladies' butts joined together. And everything is like glossy and bloody and weird, and you don't know whether to feel scared or turned on. I don't know, man. I think like not every game needs to be like this, obviously, but designers who included these bits, or like Newell, like Gabe Newell, who approved almost the Mr. Friendly character. I mean, it's a good way to break the fifth wall. Once again, your game doesn't need to be sexual. But once again, on the other hand, these boys really, I mean, they need to be like taught a fucking lesson. I don't know. And then another cut enemy was this thing called the Stink Sail, which is this like balloon-like stinging creature apparently, and it was supposed to be an enemy in the Zan level. Looks like this, and we don't know much more about it. But the design seems once again to be borrowed from Wayne Barlow's Expedition. It looks like one of the Eosapien creatures in that game. So these guys, Wayne Barlow actually also prefigured contemporary drone warfare with their design too, because these are almost soft aliens on that planet. They have this like mouth parts, and they basically take trees and gnaw them into a torpedo shape, and then they fly overhead, and they have these booms. They are like sonar locators. So when they see their prey, they drop this flechette from the sky. And it's like on one moment, a cow-like creature, alien creature is grazing, and the next is like explodes. And then these aliens descend and eat their prey. It is very similar to some of these drone grenade drop footage coming from the Ukraine war these days, don't you think? So Wayne Barlow not only preempted that, but also influenced the design of this creature, it seems. Then we got this thing called Kingpin. This thing also had a kind of weird pseudo-scientific name attached. Sactildiae nefariosum, so nefarious sac creature or something. All we know about this thing is that it was supposed to be like a captive monster, and then Gordon Freeman was going to actually like hit a button which rescued this creature, which would then go on a rampage and eliminate a group of other enemies, these human soldiers. And remember, the game of Half-Life is set in a three-way conflict between lab researchers, aliens, and then government soldiers out there to eliminate witnesses at this lab. So that was one of the other details that made this game really, really unique. There's like dozens of more enemies, which I didn't cover in this video, because they simply were not alien creatures. They were like human soldiers, or tanks, or armored personnel carriers, or stuff like that. I mean, well, it kind of looks like some of these like serrate octopi, a little if you squint. These are deep sea octopuses with fins on their heads, and there's a great work called Die Cephalopoden by this German professor called Karl Trun. So go Google that if you want to see some amazing images of contemporary, no, not contemporary, turn of the century cephalopod art. The artwork is really beautiful. And then you got this thing called the Stuka bat, which was supposed to be a diving predator, but it could also walk on the ground somehow, which was supposed to attack the players. This is what they look like in one of the demos. Who knows, maybe they were planning an aerial combat level, I don't know. But the name Stuka is of course a reference to the World War II German dive bomber, the Junkers 87 Stuka, which was a gnarly airplane decked out with all sorts of weird protrusions and stuff. But I think the Ilyushin Strumovik was the ultimate dive bomber of the war. But anyways, World War II was a horrible conflict, and I'm really not a big fan of turning its vehicles into this kind of fan things to simp over. And then, finally, we had this deleted creature called a Panther Eye, which once more was this like big-eyed panther-like creature. It was supposed to be quite big and a dangerous enemy, and no one knows what happened to that. It was cut for some reason, but it was quite big. Here you can see some excerpts in all of their low polygon CRT distorted glory, and once again I just love this aesthetics. It's so dated, but it also tells so much. And in terms of design, they seem to borrow a little from these Zool monsters in the 1984 movie Ghostbusters. Kinda similar, but maybe. I mean, maybe I'm just seeing too many patterns here. I don't know. But these monsters were really good, as was the first Ghostbusters. So go watch that film if you want. This is also another shot, and they really look like these. So they're like these like servants of this alien god, which is supposed to come to New York City through a portal inside an Art Deco building. And the design of everything, the sets, the creatures, everything in this movie is just perfect. So there. In conclusion, okay, game over, guys. The two-part C.M. Kozeman Black Mesa Natural History series is over. But in conclusion, I hope this episodes could tell you a little something about what it means to have a great game and what it means to have a great creature design in such a game. In this day and age, I'm almost 40 years old now, and I love drawing creatures, but it is like, unless someone knocks my door and says, CM Kozeman, we want you to design these creatures, you know, it's kind of difficult for me to get my foot in the door. But many people these days are studying game design, computer design, creature design. So if you want to be a great creature designer, a concept artist, now the art is easier to make than ever with AI stuff and digital art. So now that's the easy part. The good part is consistency and an overall sense of completion and relational wholesomeness that these creatures all have in the original Half-Life games. So if you want to be maybe a good creature designer, instead of looking for the best brushes to paint with or investing in an iPad to paint on Procreate with, you could look into things adjacent to creature design. You must really know natural history A to Z. You must know the history of films and science fiction literature A to Z, so that the concepts you create resonate with the player and also the other people you will be working together with. You must know gaming history really, really well. And in fact, you must know things like military history. And in the intersection of all this knowledge, you become a great designer, like the great people who designed all these creatures we saw in these last 2 episodes for the Half-Life game series. So that's that, everyone. Thank you for watching, and I hope you had a good time. Please comment in the video. It really helps with the algorithm. Also, please, I worked on this video for like 20 consecutive nights, taking time off from my day job, and every contribution on patreon.com really helps. If you are contributing, maybe show this to a gamer friend of yours, and maybe they can also help out. Also, consider supporting Prometheum at buymeacoffee.com/PrometheumS for their contribution to the video intro and outros. I mean, it really helps with the audience retention, that I can tell you from my past analytics data. So there, please consider supporting this channel. This engine does not run on fumes. Thank you to all our Patreons. Now, here is the part where I read the names of everyone supporting me on Patreon. So we got these tiers now. We got the gold tier, we got the black tier, and we got the regular tier. These people in the gold tier are the G-men and G-women and everything in between, who generously support this channel with donations of over the equivalent of a certain amount, and they are very generous soul. So thank you, Alexander the Irishman. Thank you, Danielle Russis. Thank you, Demit Tishin. Thank you, Ernest French. Thank you, Finley Elliott. Thank you, HHHH. Thank you, Hayden. Thank you, Hedrigal. Thank you, Ian Ribeiro. Thank you, Iban Krut. Thank you, Jakub Bobrovics, longtime friend and great creature designer himself. Thank you, Matthew Kashevarov. Thank you, Mike Trainer, also a good online friend and a great supporter of my surreal paintings. Thank you so much, Nicola Gibson. Thank you so much, Eric Sadard. Thank you, Miri Teixeira. Miri is also a game journalist and a writer on classical studies. And together with her partner, they have this amazing website called The Working Classicists. That's The Working Classicists. Go Google it and go subscribe to them and support them as well. They write about gaming and classical studies and everything in between. A really great portal. And even I have a history article published with them. So thank you so much, Miri. Hope you are all doing great. And then we get to middle tier. And these are people who donate like the price of something like a full course meal every month. And these really are the righteous among the mighty. They are the Black Mesa special patrons. Thank you so much, Adam Taxton, Akdemiker, Amy Colette, Anti-Tab, Arcane Flame, Ashley, Becca, Bibla Ridion, he also has a great channel, Bria Morgan, Burak Hantal, Connor Loves Crabs, Corplos, Corey Lee, Dale Durkin, Damascus, Dr. Dolphin, Durger King, Embrace Becoming, Emily Davis, Emir Nart, Even Boss, Fart Pillow, Godzilla Fan, Grace, I Names, Jacob McGuire, Jaden Russell, very, very good supporter. Thank you so much, Jaden. Jess Mann, John Travalli, Jonathan D. King, Kenneth, Kevin Schreck, like real life friend and a great filmmaker. Kyrie Fiskroff, also a great supporter of my work for ages. Thank you, Kyrie. Kies Gerard, LFB, Lane Edwards Brown, Lars LaPaul, Marcus Cruz, Matilda Duff, also a really talented author. I don't know why her books are not in the bestsellers list, to be honest. Max Amorph, Michael C., Necoscam, Pope Hat Wiz, Rania Craig, Rea Lavi, Rob Wynn, Roman Joseph Schilter, Scolio Scraps, Do you have scoliosis like I do? Seth Howard, Satinja Sirik, Terran Weyrick, the E.T. Whisperer, a real based online friend again. The Ant-Man, Thomas Strimple, hello man, also a real based online friend. Yatindu Ragana, Inaki Drago Irigoyen, Luke Shihan, Peter Avilian, Roy, Sam Tapes, SS13, Max Paul, Sam Fritz, John Clyfish, James Bell, Cyber, Christina Gaspar, Luis Alvarez Garcia, Aaron Jess, Balen Falotico, Christina Gaspar, Cro-Magnon Critic, Gerard JVR, and Hummingbird Mode. You guys really are out there, you make all of this thing possible. I mean, your donations really have, let me just say, saved my ass on more than one occasion in the last quarter, let me just say. But this would be nothing without the legions and legions of supporters I have who only donate the equivalent of $1, and you too can be among them. I mean, quantity has a quality of all of its own, and actually the greatest thanks I have proportionally go out to these legions of fans who really donate. Maybe it's out of their limited student budgets or stipends, but they're really generous. They really go out there and donate even as little as $1 a month. Really makes a difference. So if you're watching this, please also maybe consider showing my channel to your friends and letting them know what great people you are, and maybe they can also contribute so this list can grow. Let me go through all of their names. I need to, just for these sessions, I prepare a special bottle. Like a 1.5 liter bottle of drinking water. In the morning, I put in it 1,000 gram dose of vitamin C, and aspirin, calcium, vitamin D. I cram it all with all these like fizzy vitamins and supplements, and I drink them as I'm recording these talks because they're really exhausting. Anyways, let's go. A7, Eliezer, Alistair McLellan, Alt Shift X, who also has a great channel, Anders Persson, Andrew Broker, Andrew Kawam, Andrew Steiner, Angel, Arn, Atakan, Avery, Babylon Raptor, Ben Watford, Beware the Coup, who's operating a great All Tomorrow's Team channel, spinning off on one of my other sci-fi books, Blair, Brock, Byron, CR Manjerovic, Captain Capslock, Caleb Carlos, Castavian, Chase, Sigeus, Cosmic Snail, Darwin, Diana, Ebby, N-Slime, Eralp, Selam Kanka, Eugene, 44, Gib, thank you for gibbing me, Gregory, Holly, IMG, Ike Bones, Isaiah, always love a supporter with an Old Testament name, Mr. Gert van Dijk, an idol of mine. He's a great designer of alien creatures himself. Go check out his Furoha channel. Jack Daniels, probably not a whiskey operator, Jack Koloziesh, J Cave, Jan, Jerome, Joe, Josh, Joshua Newman, hello man, and I think you just had a daughter, so Mazel Tov. Joao, Kayla, Kidney Defender, King Mummy, Corey, Kusu, Lauren, Literium, Louis, B42. I always think this is like a sentient World War II airplane who's somehow donating to me on Patreon. Luke, Luisa Fuentes, Lin Huyan Wu, Maim, Martin, Michal, Mikin, Mosca, Nick, Ömercan, Selam Kanka, Ora Borealis, Parker, Pascagoulayan. I wonder if this is one of the Pascagoula encounter entities. If you know, you know. Pixie Carousel, Pester Jest, Ryan Bix, Samuel, Sawan, Scott, Seg, Scoobert, Smoog, Spencer, Squid Lord, Tancock, the Shadow Player, the Black Mage, the Normal Gecko. The three of you should form a band. Theodore Tronet, Thomas, Tommy Onions. That's like a mafia name. Who? Knock, knock. Who is it? It's Tom. Who the fuck is Tom? Tom Onions. Anyways, Tony Bologna. Talk about another Sopranos universe name. Thank you, Tony. Didn't mean to make fun, by the way. Just laughing with you, not at you. Sean Mason, Wilder Penrose, Will Kettler, Whoop, B. Tarzi, Dark Lord, Nicholas Lopez, Orlando, Plyer, Tall Green Boy, Marianne, Joel, Sheinio, Toby Muhammad, Ravinov, Molly, and finally, all the way from Poland, Barbara Wismolek. Hello, Barbara. Well, hello to you all, and thank you once more for sitting through all this nearly 350 slides of your favorite maniac Turkish uncle talking non-stop about realistic Half-Life aliens. Hey, if I'm not spending my time for this, what is life good to live for? Thank you, and I love you all, and until later, see you and have a nice day wherever you are in the world. Goodbye.
Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe and donate.